You know, with everything going on in our world, and we're going to the biggest hospital in our state, which has a children's wing, that's where we were going to, that scared me because I was thinking, how important is my kid to this whole operation?
Call it off, let it go.
Thursday night started out like just a regular night. We were all kind of getting ready for bed. Jennings started crying with his stomach hurting and ended up throwing up. Well, at first, there's actually stomach virus going around in our church. So at first, I really didn't think much about it. I figured, well, we probably got a stomach virus. He continued to cry with his stomach. He threw up again. We got all that cleaned up. We had a really restless night, just a lot of crying. Couldn't sleep well. And then the next morning is kind of when the light bulb went off that we've got to take him to go get seen at the clinic.
Friday was kind of a dreary day. We did chores that morning. Misty didn't feel the best in the world, so we were contemplating school. So she went on and did school. But then around lunch, we realized we need to take Jennings somewhere.
Really, when we got up, Jennings started complaining with his head hurting. He was holding slobber in his mouth. He didn't want to swallow. He kept saying it hurts right here. To me, those were all the classic signs that he probably had strep throat. Went to our urgent care clinic and had him checked out. The nurse practitioner that we seen, they said, well, the swab is not showing up on the swab, but he does have all the symptoms, so we're gonna go ahead and treat him like it would be strep throat. Okay, come home. And when we were actually at the clinic, Colby and I were discussing the puffiness in his face. Actually, Colby's the one that brought it up.
So Misty sees Jennings, of course, 24 hours a day. So when we were back in and he came back in from the clinic, I told Misty, I said, yeah, you can see the puffiness right here on the edge of his jawline, and that's not typical for Jennings. Jennings does have big cheeks like me, but all this right here is real thin. You can tell he's a little sick, or maybe his lymph nodes are swollen up. So we really knew that, hey, he may not have strep on the test, but it's time to treat him like he did have strep, just like they said.
He had a few little random splotches come up, but he was crying. He had been crying a whole lot, was really whiny, and we knew he was sick. At this point in time, we noticed some things, but it just wasn't anything wasn't any key signs where we need to do anything other than what we were doing. Come on back home. Everybody had lunch. We had gotten settled from that, cleaned up from lunch. As the day progressed, he got more and more whiny. He started puffing up even more. Actually, Colby went out to do more afternoon chores. I had went to get his medicine, and I just noticed that he was just real puffy. When I come back, his lips had swole up huge. Colby come in right after me, and then we decided that it was time to do something else.
Within a 15 to 20 minute window, when we both went out, he went from having a little puffiness here to then looking like he'd been stung or anaphylactic reaction to something. And we didn't know what it was. So then that's when we really kind of freaked out. I told Missy, let's just go. Let's drop everything. Let's go to the hospital. Aiden can watch the other kids, and we'll figure out that once we get there. Again, knowing that he probably had strep, but we had never seen that. Misty is a nurse. So when she said, this is something I've never seen, and then that's when we realized we need to go.
Even crazier than that is we knew that he had not been exposed to anything that was unnormal for him. No new detergents, no new soaps, no new foods, and he had not been given any medication. At this point in time, we were very concerned about the swelling with no reason. Everything, we went straight into the emergency room, almost immediately walked straight to the back. So we were very, very thankful for that. We had him seen about very quickly. Some nurse pracs come in the room and started checking him out. And after going over everything with them,
it really blew their mind too, because they were saying the same thing Misty said, that they've seen
the swelling coming
but
from?
What is this
the lips,
from?
yeah.
Right.
So we were all kind of like, what is causing the swelling? He had been given several things. They started an IV. He had been given several things in his IV at this point, and we were still seeing swelling. Through a lot of research and reading and talking to some doctors, at this point in time, we had decided to have a CT done because even when we were there,
He had a real tenderness.
He started
on the back of
really
his neck.
complaining with the back of his neck. He didn't really want to turn his head. We were trying to sit him up and down. He was just crying with all of this back in his back. So we ended up having a CT done. They were going to be looking to see if he had any abscesses back there. This is one of the doctors recommend to the nurse pracs that we were seeing that we have that done. So we did go ahead and follow through with the CT scan, and then the results come back.
We were hoping and praying that it was a CT would come back clear and that he just had a real bad case of strep, and we had medicine for it, and hopefully they just let us go home after them treating him for strep in his IV, because at this point we have not given him any medicine at the house, because it was really when we got back home with the medicine, we realized that's when we went to the hospital. So he had not had any treatment for strep, so we were hoping and praying that it was just simply really one bad case of strep. His body reacted crazy to it, and now we're on the road to making it better, and the CT was just going to verify that.
That's not what we heard. So they come back in and told us that he has a pretty large abscess in this pharyngeal space, and what they called it was, and I wasn't very familiar with this, and actually the two nurse practitioners that were really dealing with this said, you know, we've never actually seen this in our work here, so but we know what it is and we know how to take care of it. And I was pretty caught off guard too, but it was called a retropharyngeal abscess. And while we were there, they did re-swab Jennings for strep, and it did come back positive. All of the swelling is caused from the abscess. It's your body's way it responds to something like that through inflammation. So all of this was swelling, which was obviously very concerning. But now that we knew that it was not histamine related, we could give something for inflammation.
We realized that the histamine wasn't working anyway. This just kind of verified the whole what we thought. The bad thing about this was it was right on the windpipe, and so their worry was, as rapid as his swelling had been, how rapid is it going to be to keep on growing for that abscess to close up his windpipe? We're nervous and scared, especially me, because I don't know anything medically like me, even Misty does. But these nurses and nurse practitioners are saying they've never seen this. The size of it was a little bit more than they were typically used to seeing and treating with medicine. They've had something somewhat like this before, but it was never this bad. It was usually on the tonsils, and they've seen it, they've changed those, they've fixed those, they've drained those, whatever they need to do to them. But in this case, they said, well, this one's a lot longer, a lot bigger. It seems like it's went a little bit more quicker than they've seen with the swelling. So they were worried about trying to get him somewhere.
And he's little, so that kind of played another role into the next step that goes into this situation. So we have an eye, ear, nose, and throat in our town, but it's not a pediatric eye, ear, nose, and throat specialist. Our next step was to be shipped to Jackson.
And the whole time I asked her, I said, okay, let's just be real for a second. When we go to Jackson, and as big as this thing is, what does that next step look like? And the nurse practitioner said, you're probably looking at surgery. They've got to drain the abscess, because if they don't, there could be more problems with him being able to breathe. How did they think the best way was to go by ambulance? Because they'd already called, they referred, the doctors took him right then. They said, we need to get him to the Children's Research Hospital in Jackson, which is our capital. That's the closest children's hospital to us, and they said they have seen things like this, and we referred them, and you need to go there, but you need to go by ambulance.
Yeah, so they really kicked it in high gear and said, this is what needs to happen. And it was literally within
Quick.
Minutes. They said, you're approved, the ambulance is on their way, and y'all going. It was so critical for us to go by ambulance because, which to me, I was like, ambulance really?
We have lots of cool toys. Who's going to be riding with us?
Get you out the big truck. The big truck.
Alright, Mom, I'm going to let you sit right here beside her.
I'll see y'all up there.
But it was so critical because of the amount of swelling that was going on around Jennings' neck, which is where his airway is. even up into his jaw, all around his lips. We were seeing so much swelling that really just happened so quickly.
They wanted to have the availability to take care of him if something
Right.
were to
So
happen.
if we were in the car, we wouldn't have had access to medical
Care.
supplies that we could have needed, right, and the care that we could have needed versus going in the ambulance. And when we got, and I just have to say this, y'all, from walking in to that ambulance, I had the Colby drove behind us, but it makes such a difference when people are nice. And when I was in the ambulance, my phone battery was almost dead. Neither one of us had had anything to eat or drink since lunch that day. And this was like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it was late.
10,
Something like that.
9 or 10 o'clock at night. On the ambulance, I was offered a way to charge my phone. I was offered a water. And I know that medical professionals don't have to be nice to caregivers, but it made such a difference. To me, it was just, that blew my mind. So, made a huge difference there.
We have 5 other kids in a farm. So here we are, we're flying to Jackson. At this point, my parents, the other kids from the house, and take care of them, and now we're figuring out what to do. We got 2 cows to milk in the morning. We have a child going to emergency surgery, we think, at a hospital, and we have 5 other kids that we've got to get seen about.
Another aspect that really just blew our mind that I cannot speak more highly of is when we walked in that children's hospital, there was a doctor in the emergency room that met us at the door. Jennings come out of the ambulance, rolled into the double doors, and he was standing there waiting on Jennings. And that was really reassuring for me. He followed him all the way into the room, asked us all the questions.
A team of nurses and 2 doctors.
I mean, everybody just flooded the room, was right there, hands on, made sure that he was stable, he was okay, he was seen about, and that was very reassuring for us.
So we've made it to Jackson. What's your initial thoughts?
I think my brain is fried right now.
How you feeling, buddy? You feeling okay?
Yeah.
And our fear too, or my fear especially, is, you know, with everything going on in our world, and we're going to the biggest hospital in our state, which has a children's wing. That's where we were going to. That scared me because I was thinking, how important is my kid to this whole operation? And I know that sounds crazy, but for me, we're fixing to take Jennings up there. Are we just a number like everybody else, or are we going to get the actual care that we're needing?
But
they blew us away.
I
They
will
were
say
phenomenal.
they were very good.
Phenomenal.
The doctor meeting us at the door to make sure Jennings was stable
It was great.
was my number one thing, especially coming from the medical side. We were very, very happy and pleased with that. We were able to see the eye, ear, nose, and throat doctor that night. She come in, took a look
Been
at
like
his
15
case.
minutes. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, she was there pretty quickly. She had a look at our case. We were told, as you're really right there on the line for us, whether we want to go in and do surgery or we think it could be taken care of with medicines in his IV.
Didn't really give us any false hope or negative hope. She just said, let's get him started on something to keep him okay for right now. We'll look the CT, we'll load it. I think we're going to be okay to watch him with medicine until in the morning, until we consult the whole team to either plan to have the surgery or to not plan. We're now at least a point of we're thinking he's stable. We've got a team of doctors looking at him, like Missy said, very, very pleased with everything, but they were going to admit us to the main hospital out of the ER, waiting to get transferred to the main floor. The team of pediatric doctors and also the pediatric ear, nose, and throat doctors were all looking at his case, looking at his CT. So it gave us a big comfort to know that that they were on it and they were keeping us up to date. At any point in time when they were talking to us, it was like 3 or 4 doctors and a nurse or 2 just standing there talking and telling us what they've seen, and to say they've seen this, you know, once every other week, or they see this more than often. And when he had strep, that's very common to go along with what he was dealing with.
Jennings had a team. When Colby said team, he really did have a team. he had pediatric doctors looking after him, and he had pediatric eye, ear, nose, and throat doctors also looking at him, and they come together and work together to make sure that any and everything that we needed worked. And our next biggest concern after we got up to the room and got settled, the kids had come up to Jackson to stay the night there on the road from us, was what do we do with Livy? So thankful for is because I'm thinking, you know, here we are, just a number up here. And when I talked to the doctor about I have a nursing baby, you know, what I do, they were so nice and said, you know, look, usually we don't let siblings in, but with a nursing baby, you can either bring her up here or you can either get permission to be let out and let back in, but we'll work with you and make it happen. So that was another thing that we were very happy and pleased with. So thankfully I was able to leave and take care of Livy. I spent the night with her, and because Jennings, there was a possibility that he may have the surgery that morning, I was able to come back in before the visiting hours so that I could help make decisions and talk to the doctors and stuff.
Where Misty was going, we actually had to rent a hotel close, and my parents brought up our kids because of Livy, and just we wanted everybody to be close. We didn't know what the next few hours dealt with and what the situation with surgery. The same gentleman that helped us with the farming chores before, man, I called him at 10 o'clock, and here we are fixing to milk at 4. That's what we do. So in 6 hours, he made it happen. He came in and milked, took care of the farm, and that was a champ. That was a big deal for us. So again, thank you for the one that watches us and helped us do that, because that was a really big burden lifted off of us. Aiden would have stayed back, but we wanted him really with us because we didn't know what was going on the next few hours. I'm staying at the hospital with Jennings. He is restless, but seems to be doing better. Some of his swelling has went down. We had several doctors and nurses come throughout the evening just to check on him. This morning, almost a little after daybreak, there was 3 ear, nose, and throat doctors that came in, and it was the main one that would be doing the surgery. So he came in, he played with Jennings, which was phenomenal as a kid's doctor to be able to kind of relate to children. So he kind of played with his car on him. And again, that gave me very much a positive feeling about this guy, because he came in there and he joked with him, got Jennings to kind of move his neck without him really knowing it. So at that point he knew, of course, with what he's seen, hey, he's doing a lot better than what he was the night before, because the report he got was, you know, Jennings couldn't have moved his neck hardly without hurting.
He couldn't.
So to see him kind of play around with him, he said, okay, we're at a good point. Well, a lot better than what I thought last night. Feeling on him, Jennings was a little sore and tender, but nothing like the night before. So his word was, hey, look, let him eat some cereal. Let him have something. Let him eat, because at this point we were not able to give him anything because we thought we were going to surgery. But he said, I want to watch him. I want to see how he does today. I'm going to
Which is what we would opted for too.
Absolutely.
We wanted to be able to treat him with medicine instead of surgery.
Let me consult with my team. We'll talk to the pediatric side, and together. And this is 6 doctors that we're consulting, or we're not consulting, but they're consulting. So that made us feel really good. And he said, let's watch him throughout the day. Jennings progressively got better. At one point, they were able to still treat him, but at the same time, they were able to take some of the fluid off of him, that is IV fluid that he was getting, because he was eating and drinking really well. And then again, we came back to the night, and the main concern was, hey, let's see how he does tonight, and then we'll reevaluate in the morning. So they hooked him back up to the IV, and then again, we just kind of held our hands and waited and prayed that God just let Jennings get better. That way we won't be facing a surgery in the morning.
I can assure you, by the next morning, there was no complications, because we could hear him all up and down the halls. He was so loud, trying to climb up and down the bed.
They were probably ready to get this kid out of here.
He could hear him everywhere. So the pediatrician that come by the next morning said, yeah, I think he's probably ready to go. So glad to hear that. He was a super champ. We had some meltdown moments, I'm not gonna lie. He showed out and acted totally nuts at times. He was in an unfamiliar place with all kinds of unfamiliar things.
And our kids don't take medicine, so he really, there were some medicines he reacted bad to. Not as in, I mean, his feet would hurt, or he would get really restless where he couldn't sleep. The first night, he actually didn't go to bed till about 3 that morning, so that was just a tough night. But all in all, he was a champ and went through it like Misty said.
He did. And they told us, look, from our side, we feel like he's ready to go. And we concurred. We felt like that he had dramatically improved. He was not having any issues. He was running around, no neck problems, no swelling problems, no swallowing problems, obviously no breathing problems. Comfortable enough, and they did as well, to let us go home, and he could just finish taking his course, antibiotics by mouth.
He's still got a little stuff he's got to get off, but we are finally going home. What do you think?
I think we're all ready to be back home.
I think between being in a different atmosphere, him not being with his siblings, us sleeping all crazy the last few days, we're all exhausted, ready to be home and be back on the farm.
Yep, and we're just very, very thankful that
Absolutely.
he recovered well. We did not have to have surgery. He is. They can hear him down the hall, so we definitely don't have to worry about any blocked airways anymore. So we're very, very thankful. It was just answered prayers for sure. He was very much glad to get home. He did not like the IV coming out. That was a lot of fun.
That was probably worse than anything.
It was probably worse than getting it put in. So he did not like that, but we got to come home and get him settled in, and he has played and enjoyed himself.
And we're glad to be home.
We are glad to be home. And most importantly, we had so many people praying for us, and if you were one of those people, I know had viewers that were direct messaging us. If you're one of those people, thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Absolutely.
Because it was nothing more than answered prayers, because he had a large abscess, and
that one hospital wouldn't even touch.
That next step was, hey, we've got to take him to surgery, we've got to drain it. And even the doctor, when we first saw her, was talking about reevaluation on Monday, which is not even Monday yet, and we're already home. But God just answered those prayers and healed Jennings through the medicines way faster than we could have ever thought. We know it was because we had people praying for us, so we really thank y'all from the bottom of our heart. Those of y'all that reached out, called us, and texted us, we thank y'all so very much. It really does mean a lot to us. But most importantly, that Jennings was well, and we had no major surprises after that, no hiccups. Everything went very smoothly after.
And we can't say enough good things about this hospital and what they did for us and how they made us feel like we were the only ones getting served. And we're in a place that there's a lot of sick kids, a lot of sick people. There's helicopters coming in and out. And it just breaks, my heart breaks for all the people that's in there still today. When we walk out, they're still there. And I really commend the hospital that did serve us. They did a phenomenal job. And again, we're just glad to be home, glad to be with all our kids and be back to somewhat of a norm. Thank y'all for watching. Keep up with our journey. If you have liked what you saw, please go by and subscribe at the below. We hope we don't have any more of these kind of videos, but we wanted to tell you the story, and thank you for keeping us in your prayers and then watching this, and thank you again. God bless.
Happy homesteading, y'all.
Happy homesteading.